Welcome, everybody, and thank you on behalf of GemQuest for taking the time out today to join us. This is our GemQuest on turquoise, and I find it really interesting because this is an area that a lot of people know a little tiny bit about, and a lot of people love the colors of turquoise and so on, but not everybody has a great deal of knowledge about turquoise because it's not something we get taught about that much in our gemological training. It's just sort of quick slide over and let's move on to the next gem. And so I thought it would be really interesting today to get one of the world's experts on turquoise to share with us today. When I started in this business, I personally thought, and I shared this with Joe down a little while ago, that I thought that the only really good turquoise in the world was Persian because it was pure, it was an amazing color and had depth and all that sort of thing. And it just appealed to something in the basic, our heart of loving colors because it was so pure. And then since I'm also a mineral collector, I was absolutely stunned to find out not only is this a gem, but occasionally in very rare instances it occurs as crystals. And so I managed to trade with someone through the Baltimore Symposium to get some micro crystals of turquoise from the Bishop Mine in Lynch Station in Virginia, which was a proud addition to my collection. So I'm hoping today we're going to learn and expand. And I'm really hoping today that you're going to remove your shyness shields and ask some really good questions, because that's how we're going to learn in this program, because Jodan's going to give us a basic talk and look for some really good questions to fill in some answers for you. So please decide when we open for questions to join us and give us some good questions. So who is Jodan Lowry? Well, Jodan is the fourth generation as a turquoise dealer. He co-founded and privately owns and curates the Turquoise Museum, which opened in 1993. In the turquoise industry, Jodan is known as a miner, a lapidarist, a designer, a consultant, an appraiser, researcher, and an educator, which is one of the roles he's filling today. And thank you for that, Jodan. He's authored 2 books, numerous articles, has been the source for turquoise information around the world. It is the people in turquoise and their stories and the unique information about turquoise that fascinates Jodan. Every miner, culture, artist, imitation, producer, scientist, salesperson, these are the people that make it interesting for him. And one of his sayings is the only thing more colorful than turquoise is the color of the personality that is trying to sell it to you. This is a man that's imbued himself with knowledge of the history, the geopolitics, and all aspects of turquoise and how it has affected the world in many different ways. So this is interesting because not all gems have had the kind of influence that turquoise has. So I'm going to pass the baton or the microphone over to Jodan and ask you to welcome him warmly and hold on your questions until we're open for a question period. But I do hope you'll be involved. Jodan.
Thank you for having me on, Ray. I appreciate it. It's been good to get to know you a little. And welcome to everybody else. If anybody has done any little bit of research on me, I think that turquoise is a massive subject that has so many different points of interest and information that everybody has a place to play in trying to understand it. So as we go along today, I'm going to be, the presentation will be to the basic categories of turquoise, and then that way we can do questions and answers that are specific to whatever your guys' fascination is, and hopefully we can all learn together. So to start off, since Ray already made me sound smarter than I am, the presentation that I'm going to do should take about 30 minutes. And then from there, if you guys would write down your questions or categorize what you want to talk about after that, then I would let Ray handle the question and answers and who's talking and what after that. So if that's all right, you guys can listen to me and my voice for 30 minutes, I hope, and we'll get started. Can everybody hear me? Is everything working? All right. So real quick, I do curate and co-founded the Turquoise Museum, which is a private museum. We do books, we do education all over the world, whether it's Japan or museums or just people who want to buy a piece, or even to scientists who know their specific categories. One of the things that makes me a little bit unique from most people is most people work in a specific category of turquoise. I've done all of it. I've traveled the world. I have been to mines everywhere except Iran, which I could go, but I'm not sure I could get back. So we're waiting on that one. My grandfather traveled to Iran. I've cut turquoise my whole life growing up. And like I say, I've owned some mines and I have interests in mines, and I consult with a lot of different mines around the world. So hopefully I'll be able to give you guys a general information as well as specific to what you guys want to learn. The Turquoise Museum itself was founded in 1993, and this is its location in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with a few pictures of the galleries. We display over 100 different mines from around the world. We display over 2,000 artifacts of jewelry around the world, plus hundreds of more. We have original photography, education, information, research. My favorite thing about the Turquoise Museum is the library, because I collect people and stories. And it's amazing how somebody who has their prism of knowledge in turquoise, whether it's a mine or whether it's scientific information or a study they did, there's nowhere to catalog it. There's nowhere to put it. And so there isn't in my museum either, but I do catalog it in the library. And so the museum can teach you almost any subject, and then you can research specific after that. So in turquoise, it's a mineral. It's also defined as a color. So
Sorry, Joe Dan. Sorry to interrupt you. Are you showing slides? Because a number of us are not seeing any slides.
I am showing slides. Let me have my son work on that.
I understand that.
Да, Лёленька, добрый вечер тебе. Как ты там?
Yes, we're not seeing any screen sharing here at the moment. I think.
All right, so he's working on it. Let's see if we can get that done. Sorry, everybody.
Okay, we're there. Good. Okay, so
Do you see
yes,
it now?
I wasn't sure whether it was just you were introducing it before you started the presentation or not.
Do you see the transfer now? The screen?
Yes. Now we can
All
see
right.
the picture of the Turquoise Museum. Okay, I'll mute myself and I'll let you take over again.
So where do you want me to pick up? Start here at the Turquoise Museum?
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
All right, so these are some of the pictures of the galleries within the museum. The museum is 8,500 square feet. And then we have a city block where we have a cafe, we have our gift shop, and our different hands-on categories and that people can learn. And then a parking lot so that people can park their cars. In Albuquerque, we don't have a rail system, so there's no you're not going to be getting off of a train to go to the Turquoise Museum. So starting on turquoise, is that all right? Everybody's caught up and everybody can see this? So turquoise is a color, turquoise is a mineral. One of the concepts that I've tried to do throughout developing the museum and writing books is to tell a themed story with turquoise being the subject overall, but trying to get people to be able to work through why turquoise is collectible, why people are fascinated with it. So part of that is that turquoise is organic in the way that people come to know it. You can come to know it culturally, or you can come to know it as a color. And so when you're dealing with individuals on turquoise, there's multiple reasons that they're fascinated with it. That doesn't even have to be a gemstone. It could just be the color. But as a lot of people have heard, turquoise is referred to as the sky stone because of the color of turquoise, some in the Persian blue, as well as what is a famous mine in New Mexico and Arizona in the United States called Sleeping Beauty. So it's a color that is marketed, but it is also a gemstone. And so when you get categorizing it into the gemstone, then it gets a little bit more colorful than just somebody doing it that as a specific gem. So in the gemstone world, almost all gemstones are defined by science. And turquoise is not defined by science first, it's defined by the mystique, the color. And so whether it is the evil eye or whether it's the Southwest Native American or the mystical qualities, turquoise's original value had nothing to do with science and nothing to do with a monetary value. It had to do with the mystique. And that is actually still true today in a lot of the different categories of turquoise. It can be culturally sold as a color, whereas it is irrelevant to the buyer or to the user, except for its color. And so it becomes kind of interesting that it'll protect you from rattlesnake bites in the Southwest. It'll, sign of wealth, a sign of health, like say the evil eye, it's a protection from the evil eye in other parts of the world. So there's a great mythical quality to turquoise that most other gems other than a crystal would have. And so that participation is important when we actually get into the evaluating of turquoise by culture. So there's always the expectation versus the reality. So if somebody's a scientist, they always want me to shut up and talk about the science. If somebody is a Native American or they are interested in the mystical qualities, they could care less about the science. But in that grouping, we are all defined in how we participate in life on what has been put into our ears and through our eyes into our brain. So a lot of us have not just misconceptions on turquoise or its histories, but from those misconceptions, we make and determine some of our information. Such as if you look at the picture on my left of the Native American older woman, the woman there sitting, her name is Helen Ramon. She knows nothing about turquoise. She wears it as a cultural representation. She's an 8th grade math teacher. But that's not what you would assume if you're an American and you think that the Native American knows everything about turquoise. Most turquoise is something that is sold, whether it is here or Iran, China, things like that, or Tibet. What a lot of people don't know is if you were to look at the gentleman in the middle picture on the top row, that is a duke in Croatia, and all of his garment is gold and turquoise. But most people don't relate to Croatia having something that valuable in their arts. Whereas the framed picture on the right is Iran. So turquoise is all over the world, and generally the cultures that use turquoise do not comprehend turquoise. And so if it's the Tibetans, Tibet, the province of Tibet does not have a turquoise source. It is all imported from what is China. Whereas the Native American does not control any turquoise mines, they buy it as a trade bead. And so there's lots of misconceptions that go from what we assume to what actually is. Because in the end use of turquoise in art, generally most people's knowledge of turquoise is from the artist, not from the miner, not from the lapidary, not from the science perspective. And that's why there's so much misinformation in turquoise, is most people don't have access to the beginning of the categories. It's in the mystique and in the culture. So expectations are not always the reality, because our source of knowledge is not the beginning source, it's the end source. I'm gonna go the right way. So turquoise is found around the world. Now this map here is dealing with what the most common places are for the mass formation of turquoise, not the crystalline. So you have the United States and you have Mexico, you have Chile, China, Iran, Egypt. So there's lots of different sources around the world, and those are just some of them. Right now, Kazakhstan is producing a lot of turquoise. Armenia is working on their production. And as you guys know, in the science world, since I'm assuming that's what most of you are on this Zoom call, you can have Belgium and different places that crystalline turquoise has been found. But what is sold in the world is going to be from mainly these sources. In the United States, same thing, marketing and expectation. New Mexico actually has the least and worst turquoise in the world. And if any of you have ever read some of my papers or books, my argument is that the Western Hemisphere was written by white men who came from the East Coast and then wrote the whole Western Hemisphere without ever going anywhere else. And one of my challenges to the world is that I don't believe that's true. My subject is turquoise, but I'm pretty sure you would have to go a lot of other places and see what they have in their archaeology and what they have in their histories to be able to understand trade and any other rest of what anthropology has introduced to the world. But in the end result, Nevada, our state of Nevada, actually has the best turquoise in the United States, and it also produces the most. Nevada has, if you were to rank the turquoise mines around the world, it has 6 of the top 10 mines in the world. New Mexico has 7 deposits of turquoise. Only one of them would I rank in the top 25. And so there's lots of different sources around the world, and we're going to get into how the world compared to the United States looks at turquoise a little bit different. So when turquoise is mined or found, it's generally found in arid, dry climates. And in the category, if your water table is too high, you're not going to have turquoise. And if there is too much water going on, you're not going to have turquoise. Scientifically, in the formations of turquoise, nobody has been able to specifically figure out why turquoise can form in one section of a hill and the rest of the hill, there's no turquoise in all of its open pockets and crevices. It's only in a specific spot. To give you a category on that, an old miner in Nevada, his name was J.W. Edgar, but he would go out when he was looking for new sources of turquoise, he'd go out to a hillside. And so his information, the data he had in his mind was that turquoise, water forms the turquoise. Water starts from the snow melt. Wherever it melts first on that south slope of that hill, you're generally gonna have the best opportunity to find the formation turquoise. And so on the first snows, he would go out to the areas of the claims he owned, and wherever the snow melted first, he would stake it. And then in the spring, when it was a little bit warmer, he would go and search that for turquoise. He was one of the 3 American kings of turquoise because he owned more mines than anybody else because he found a bunch of them and named them. So whether it is in China, Mexico, the United States, or anywhere else, their difference in the formations is not much. How it forms and why it forms so rarely to itself into the different areas, we don't know. But most turquoise mines, we assume, have already been discovered. So in the geology, I only believe in my studies that turquoise is only supergene in its formation. It's formed by the cool waters. Heat to turquoise is destructive. And so I believe that the cool waters have collected from the metamorphic or the igneous formations, but I don't believe that turquoise is anything except formed with the cool waters. Now, specifically, when somebody has questions on that, it depends on how many mines you've been to in the world, which mines you've seen, because they can form in different formats, from being on the top of a specific hill to forming 2,000 feet below. So there's lots of different geological formations. and reasons why turquoise can have certain subjects. So if we were to learn about the Iranian mines, we could come to certain conclusions, but if we add some of the American mines, then it would have more data to where we would have to make different decisions. And so that's part of those processes. So it's a hydrated phosphate of aluminum and copper. It's triclinic, and I know most of you guys all know this. The triclinic picture there is from a Hitachi microscope, and that is done from the crystals from Virginia at Lynch Station. So that's what that specific picture is of. 6.5 on the Mohs scale. Most people say 6, but again, it depends on how much turquoise has been tested and who has the information. So I will go with 6.5, not 6. Forms in essentially your veinlets and your nuggets. Copper makes it blue, iron makes it green. That's your basic. So if it is ferrium, it's going to be towards the green. And if it's not, then it'll stay within the blue. And I'm sure on this, we'll get a lot of questions when we get into the turquoise family and planarite and chalcosiderite and phosphite, but I'll save those for your guys' questions. Trying to just get the basics. In the mining of it, they went from the stone hammers. The third picture up on the top, the middle picture is one of the ancient mines at Cerrillos, New Mexico. If you want to get back into the histories, the black and white picture to on the right of that is Doc Wilson, and he is mining turquoise. That picture is 1905 in Mexico. The next picture over is Chile, South America, which I say and claim is the densest, best blue turquoise that has ever been mined in the history of mankind. So that's part of what Ray referred to as, I thought Persian was. The Persians think it is, which is okay. Just depends on if we get into the science. And so the rest of the pictures are just showing some of the mining around the world. The ore cart picture is from Iran. The excavator is Cripple Creek in Colorado. The middle picture is the Campitos mine that was pre-1960. You can see that it had a lot of overburden and a lot of mining going on there. Today, the Campitos mine is a different color and they're mining the other side of that mountain. And the next picture of the tunnel is in Iran. And then the last picture is me mining at one of my mines called Enchantment, which is in New Mexico. On the lapidary of turquoise, because it gets to a 6.5, but which we got to remember is that turquoise as a cool water formation, sedimentary formation, it is going to slowly develop over time as the water brings the mineralogy, evaporates, dissipates within the crack, crevice, or open space. Then it continues that over thousands of years to get to its formation. But when we go in and mine it, we're interrupting nature. And so to understand the lapidary of turquoise, we would also have to understand its formation. So there is turquoise that is too soft to cut and polish, and you could just burn it if you tried to, or it would just shatter, or it could just disappear in the water, depending on how porous it is. And that is one of the reasons why in ancient times it could be used and cut and shaped without, unlike a diamond, to make it simple. So in today's world, we use grinding stones, the 100 carborundum wheel, and then we start with 220 on sandpaper, and then we'll use leather to give it a polish. In polishing turquoise, if you do all of your categories correctly, you go from 100 grit to the shaping to 30 to 50,000 grits for its final high-end polish, like glass. And there's lots of techniques around the world. The bottom pictures are showing you China, Iran, and Germany. And a lot of people don't know this in America, but the modern cutting of turquoise was introduced by Germans who were over here. Just like most of the turquoise mines were found by German heritage people, because they were the ones that were trained to build roads and lay out the telegraph and all of those kinds of things. That's how a lot of the different mines were found. And they were also the ones that were coming over and doing the layout of all of the different claims and markers around the country. So there's a huge history of especially with Eder Oberstein and the cutting that was actually from the German influence. All right, so getting to it as a gemstone. The reason why it's a gemstone is it has rarity. Essentially, and this is an average, 85% of all turquoise is too soft to cut and polish. We call most of that chalk or cake, which means that you can write on a chalkboard with it. That is not the gemstone. That is your waste product. That's what makes turquoise a gemstone. If all turquoise was blue and all turquoise was green, then you could go to, in America, you could go to Home Depot and buy blue and green gravel. It has to have a rarity to have a value as a gemstone. And in turquoise, the darker colors that are able to be cut and polished, and as they get darker and darker, they are older in their formation, or the way that they formed with clays or different geological formations, it can form quicker if it's cleaning or if it's attaching quicker over time. So the darker the color is more rare, therefore the darker the color is more expensive because it is more rare. And so in the rough pieces in the middle, you can see that it goes from the lower grade blue to a deeper blue. And then that is the same logic that would be used in grading out those Persian stones that are on the right. So you have, as long as it's hard enough to cut and polish, it doesn't have to be dark in color. That's why you have that almost white one on the left. And then the more expensive, the darker it gets. In the grading of turquoise, you have condition, color, matrix or clarity, mine source, the size, the weight, and the use. So whenever you're reading a piece of turquoise and you're going to cut from the rough to a finished stone, there's different markets in the world depending on what it presents to be able to be cut. So if you're cutting for clarity, then you're going to cut away all of the host rock. If you're cutting for your matrix patterns, then you're going to pay attention to how evenly aesthetically the matrix, the host rock, forms to the piece that you're cutting. So the greatest value in the rarity of turquoise, and this is why turquoise will always be greater than science, and this is where everybody in science screws up with turquoise, is they stay within their realm and stay insistent that they are right. The problem is that supply and demand proves that science is not right. And to learn turquoise, you have to know which mines are famous and which mines are not famous. So it's kind of like if you go shopping for a car, I could make a general statement and say Mercedes are worth more than Fords. But if we're going to talk about what's the most expensive, it's going to be the original Shelby, which is a Ford. Somebody can complain about that, but it's still a fact. If you're talking about dogs or horses or animals, if I say this is a German Shepherd, this is a Greyhound, this is a Saint Bernard, nobody's confused that each of those is graded unto itself, and it's still a dog, but each one is unique. And then how the quality of that dog or that horse is built off of knowledge. And so in turquoise, the greatest rarity is how famous and what the classic look is of that specific mine. So the rarest turquoise in the world, which sells for $5,000 to $7,000 per carat, is called Black Web number 8, and it's from Nevada, USA. Whereas Sleeping Beauty, that lots of people in the world think is rare, isn't. And it can sell for $4, $5 a carat. I'm pretty sure $4 and $5 a carat isn't as rare as $5,000 or $7,000 a carat. And so people, to understand turquoise, actually have to understand the rarity of the mines. So the rarity, I think I have them ranked as Black Web 8, Bisbee, Lone Mountain, Lander Blue, and then Persian. And so there's different categories that go into all of that. And you can go on my blog site, Jodan's Corner, and read those and watch the videos on how I justify them and how I use different categories to give it that valuation. But essentially in turquoise, once you know the different gradations of it, then you make your comparisons. So spiderweb, if any of you have ever heard that term, is where the matrix is evenly aesthetically placed. That is your bottom picture. On the right, I'm assuming it's your right. And when you have that type of pattern, that is rare. Much more rare than the picture that's to its left where the matrix dominates the turquoise. That is common. And so as you learn those categories, then you're starting to learn how to evaluate turquoise. So if we add in clarity, what happens with clarity is that is man's interpretation to the rock that nature produced. So man can cut a clear stone out of a lot of matrix rock. And all you have to do is cut it all out. Only nature can perfectly lace a rock. And that is why in the American market, we value, and Japanese and a few other markets, we value the spider web as much more rare than clarity. Clarity, if you look at it like with the Iranian history and turquoise, most of their turquoise, because they're cutting for clarity, are all small stones, not large. And so a stone that gets larger than an American nickel, that could be considered rare, and then develop how dark is the color of blue and how the clarity is substantial or not within that piece. Then you're getting into rarity. But if it's smaller than a nickel, you can get it anywhere in the world because all they're doing is cutting away the matrix. And so there's a discussion point on clarity and spiderweb that the world still has to hold. When you look up at the top picture on the right, the person who cut the oval green stone, the matrix is not aesthetic and it's not evenly placed. And so it would not be as valuable as one of the spiderweb stones. When you look at the picture on the left top in the middle, it is showing you low grades of turquoise that are extremely common. That kind of turquoise could sell for 10 cents, 20 cents a carat. And it's generally used in Native American jewelry and sold as a bulk item of a look, not a refined item that some of the Persian jewelry would be with the small clear and set in gold. So the market covers it all, but there's different rarities that are specific not only to culture and tradition, but they're also specific to nature and how nature formed it. And those are how you generally are going to work on grading a stone. So here you are with clarity. The more clear and the darker the color, the more rare, including size, because size becomes part of your rarity. You have a greater chance of having more matrix the larger the stone becomes. Then grade 3 American mines, and you'll notice it's just essentially the deeper the color, the more brilliant the color, and the evenness of the matrix are going to be the grades. That is not true in all turquoise, just like you would grade a St. Bernard for its wonderful hair, and you would grade a greyhound dog for its lack of hair. So turquoise gets extremely specific by the mine, just like cars or anything else. So Bisbee turquoise, the gem grade, looks like the stone on the right, but you'll notice that's not spiderweb. Royston turquoise is famous for having the duality of a blue-green mix. And so it also is not graded by spiderweb. And this is where I say that scientists have the hardest time learning turquoise, is because that is visual. And that is specific knowledge to a mine. It is not specific knowledge that can be generalized, such as clarity. As far as the imitation of turquoise, there's a ton of it, just like all gemstones. But in turquoise, probably 95% of the whole world market is imitation. When I say imitation, that does not mean fake. An imitation is a legitimate product. A fake is anything misrepresented. So I could sell Chinese turquoise as American, and I sold you a fake. I misrepresented its country source. Different categories like that. And so the science that goes into making an imitation of turquoise is incredible. The guys who make the imitations are some of the smartest people in the world. And I know because one of them is my great uncle who created the enhanced process, which is considered the best imitation. So there's different processes. It goes all the way back to where that you could, I mean, Faience glass was your original imitation for the Egyptians to use in their art form, since they couldn't get enough of the blue turquoise. But you also can treat it with oils. Turquoise that is a low grade or is chalk is extremely porous. And so just like a sponge, if you take a sponge and you fill water into the sponge, that sponge is going to increase its perceived color because of its index. So in the chalk turquoise, it is porous like a sponge, and they're going to pressurize or vacuum with heat a resin that's going to go and penetrate all the way through the rock. Then that color, as it cures, stays because the plastic stays within the structure. And so that specific category and process is called stabilized. But you could do kitchen treats that are real simple and temporary, and you could fill it with oil or you can cook it in wax to get the same effect, only temporary. And then enhanced turquoise is a whole different process, and it is taking turquoise that is hard enough to cut and polish and increasing the color, bumping it from a low grade or a medium grade to a gem grade color. But you are imitating the color, or you're imitating the hardness. Those are not natural colors, which is another misrepresentation by the turquoise world. There's also pressed block, which we could get into. There's True Stone, which is an incredible product that was created by a father and his son many years ago. There's cultured turquoise. Lots of imitations. There's plastic. They can dye your magnesite and your calcite. There's glass. There's composite. There's a guy out there who does everything with concrete and then enamels the concrete. So I'm not saying that was very scientific. There are laws in the world that handle some of these things, but almost all of the laws are disclosure laws. So in the United States and the Federal Trade Commission, they suggest you ask whether a stone is natural, laboratory created, imitation, or if the stone has been treated. And so that's all great and fine, but if you don't have knowledge of what that actually means, it's easy for a salesperson to overcome that information with some sales techniques. But their laws do matter. They're there. They're not necessarily correct technically, but in my opinion, people who want to learn will learn, and people who don't want to learn will shop a different way. So I say it this way: buy what you like, get a story, share the story. Every piece of turquoise, every artist, every store, and every salesperson is unique. Enjoy every turquoise adventure. Now, for all of you who think, wow, the guy really thinks he knows a lot about turquoise, I don't like turquoise. I happen to think it's ugly. So my fascination is the people aspect. I think that anthropology is the greatest science to understand any subject, because as humans, we all can make mistakes. We all have our favorites, or we all have specific categories we enjoy. And so when you look at these pictures at the bottom, turquoise is global, and it's generally only known in its end use. That's where the appreciation is, but that's also where the disconnect is from the science world. So the science world goes through the specifics, and the end result is just all about sales. So it gets kind of interesting, I think. That's the kind of stuff I enjoy. If you guys are really interested, we're holding Turquoise United this year at the Turquoise Museum and at our convention center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We'll have all kinds of events, interviews. There'll be an auction, gallery, gem show, panel discussions, hands-on learning. One of the categories that will be handled as I will introduce the grading system to turquoise that should be in the world. I'll introduce it very specifically and aggressively to where that people are going to have to change what they say about turquoise and start representing the imitations for what they are, such as enhanced turquoise is not the gemstone turquoise, it is an imitation. Those kinds of things we'll be handling at this discussion. We have the guys who have built the imitations coming. If you go to the website turquoiseunited.com, it'll go through and give you a list of the GIA representatives that'll be here, the appraisers that'll be here. Like I say, the guys who have created the actual imitations, the guy who created True Stone, the guy who created pressed block, the guy who created cultured turquoise, the guy who is the only expert in stabilized turquoise in the world will be here. And so it'll be access to information. And what I try to do is a lot of the guys that are going to be here, including scientists who I consider the only ones who know turquoise, in the categories because their knowledge is more complete. They've been places, they have had conversations on the end use all the way through the science. They will be here. And so it's an opportunity for people around the world to learn turquoise, but that is this August. And that is my presentation in a nutshell, because I know that you all have specifics that you would like to talk about. And I enjoy those kinds of things. So however Ray wants to handle it from here, I think we're all in his hands. All right, Ray.
God forbid. Do you have any questions, Jolyon, that you gathered? Hello, Jolyon.
Sorry, I'm just looking in the chat. Hold on, bear with me a moment. There were a couple of questions that came up at the beginning, which I tried to talk about, try to answer while we're going about, you know, so I gave the URL for the Turquoise Museum. So, okay, so so questions, what about turquoise from what is now Egypt, Israel, and how about Cornwall, UK? I can talk a little bit about the turquoise from Cornwall, UK, because I know that quite well. But I don't know the Egypt-Israel situation. So I don't know if Joe Dan wants to talk a little bit about Egypt-Israel turquoise.
The Egyptian turquoise, everybody can argue whether the Sinai Peninsula mines or the mines in Iran are the oldest in the world. My opinion is Egypt's work, the Sinai Peninsula is an older source. They produce some gorgeous turquoise, especially not necessarily for clarity, but some spiderweb turquoise. They are producing large volumes in the last, I don't know, 10 years. Most of it is treated. Most of it is stabilized here in the United States, actually in Arizona. From turquoise, if we're going to do different areas like Cromwell in England had some turquoise deposits. It was kind of a watery blue with a white host rock. It probably had a hardness of it on a scale, on the Mohs scale, probably a 5, but it never really, it was thinner and it had a harder time getting a high polish to it on that. Now remember, that doesn't include the chalk and the different categories. I'm talking about the turquoise that is cuttable from the area. And then of course, you have Armenia, which has been producing turquoise, and Kazakhstan. So those are your main areas as far as end use. I understand that Belgium has the crystal and things like that, but that's not end use and it's not something that is seen.
Well, I understand, step in here as a cutter. I used to be told that the better turquoise that took a higher polish had a higher, was more siliceous than the chalky turquoise. And and therefore more compact and dense, and therefore would take a better polish. Is that correct?
It's correct. You just want to make sure we're talking apples to apples. Your low-grade turquoise, essentially, if you're talking to somebody in the turquoise world that is a lapidary, low-grade, if you'll remember back to one of the pictures, I showed you some turquoise that had a very light blue, whitish color, but they were cut cabs. The chalk is not being graded. So the chalk in the cake is kicked out. So as long as we're talking about low-grade turquoise being usable, that is true. And the reason is the density is going to allow the higher polish. And so you can generally tell the density by the darker the color of the stone. And that's why those stones have a greater, what we call in America, zat. They have a more depth to the color and brilliance to the color. And therefore a higher polish can be applied.
It was interesting that the pyramids in Egypt were, almost from the beginning, were religious attractions. Like they were like a go-to tourist place. And so around the base of the pyramids and unearthing the archaeology, they would find faience covered scarabs. There were copies of the turquoise scarabs that were highly valued. So the tourists would walk away with what they thought was a turquoise scarab, but it really was an enamel that was baked onto the outside of a clay imitation. And I don't even know if that sort of process is still being used today.
I think all imitations are used today. It's amazing how many different categories there are. That's why I don't believe there'll ever be a turquoise expert in the world, is turquoise has so many different nuances, even in the imitations. I mean, you could use Bakelite. You could, you could melt down plastic laundry to, you get your laundry soap out of. You could melt glue down on that and drill it and have beads. There's so many different ways to make an imitation to turquoise, and some of it's cultural. But if you look at some of the European museums and you go and see some of their faience, that stuff is collectible now. And so it depends on how an imitation does have value, because the value is the cost of production. And so a lot of people have misnomers about imitation and look at it without enough knowledge or enough data to appreciate some of the categories, because there's a lot of science that goes into some of them.
Julian, you have any more questions?
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to take a quick opportunity while we talked about the Cornish turquoise. I'll show you, if I just screen share for a second, I'll show you the piece here, which I have. And can you see that? Is that shared correctly?
Yep.
It looks like it.
Okay, so this here, and I can actually rotate it, and you can see this is a 12 centimeter piece of turquoise from Cornwall. We're associated with wolframite is the black, and the yellowish is valamophite, which is basically it's a rusty tin oxide, and cassiterite crystals in there as well. The interesting thing about this locality is it's one of the few places in the world where crystalline turquoise has been found. And in fact, in the cavity in the middle here, you can't make it out on this low quality photo, there are some very tiny pore microcrystals of turquoise in there as well. So yeah, this it just shows you this is the sort of about as good as it gets in terms of color of the English turquoise. And this particular locality now has been flooded or over filled in, so you can't get into this locality. I collected this in 1994, so that's pretty much what the quality of the English Cornish turquoise was. Okay, so let me quit that.
So don't get rid of it.
Okay.
So the pieces that I actually have for my display, if you look at to the left of your wolframite, and then there's like a yellow trapezoid, the darker blue there, most of mine is that color, only a brighter blue. And the specimens are more solid turquoise. And so yeah, that's why I think the conversation with turquoise has to be more inclusive than it has ever been to get to some of the answers and appreciations.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got, I mean, in some of the material I collected there, it goes to a very greenish color as well. So you've got obviously a wide spread of iron content. And obviously chalcosiderite is very common in Cornwall as well. And the two are often found together in the same localities. And there is a full series between them.
Same family.
Yep.
Thanks, Julian.
Okay, and so now let's get back to the.
Let me answer two questions I have seen so far, and while you look for other ones, all right?
Okay.
The person who asked about Turquoise Hill, Cerrillos, and Doug Magnus. Doug Magnus will be at the Turquoise conference, but the answer to the Tiffany, there was never a Tiffany mine. Tiffany was the icon to the world of turquoise as the Americas went west. And anybody who had a turquoise that was being produced at their mine that was a blue, they all named it Tiffany. Not registered, not owned by Tiffany, but they marketed it to that because that was the buyer. So Royston in Nevada, if it was blue, they called it Tiffany. The turquoise in New Mexico that is Tyrone was sold as Tiffany. So Tiffany was iconic and marketed, but it was not a true claim name to a specific mine. There was over 20, or I can document over 20 mines that were sold as Tiffany. On another question, it was asked is that they had been told that all turquoise has to be stabilized. That is totally untrue. That is a salesperson selling an imitation. Do you have any other questions that you found in there?
There was, again, a comment about, immediately below that message, a comment about German jewelry fairs, a guy selling a poison green color turquoise carved materials. Is this material real turquoise or is it dyed?
Well, there is green turquoise in Iran. There's also green turquoise in Armenia. So I would have to see it. I don't know what they mean by poison.
Jordan, can I ask you a favor?
Of course.
Sure.
Could you please elaborate a little bit on the diversity of chemistry and the different subcategories within turquoise that you did in some of your blogs?
Okay.
The different minerals that are categorized as turquoise.
Right. The turquoise family.
Please.
There's 5 in the turquoise family, and I'm not gonna, 2 of them generally are never mentioned or found to buy other than as a mineral collector, but 3 of them are very common and very important. So there's turquoise, and that would include the blue or the green in all of its grades from soft colors to brilliant colors. Then there is chalcosiderite, which is on one side, if we triangle it out. And then there is phosphite. Phosphite is your apple green. And visually, so here's another science compared to the visual. Where most people think chalcosiderite and they do the testing on it, and it's all of these crystallines and all of the greens, and they say chalcosiderite. Chalcosiderite in its mass form is actually a milky white to a milky green, generally with a formation of slate or shale, a hard black host rock. And those are also sold on the market. A lot of people sell both as turquoise. Technically, they're not. Scientifically, they're not. So your copper rich is going to be the turquoise, your aluminum rich is your chalcosiderite, and then your zinc rich is your phosphite. But when you look at them visually, it's easy to tell the difference. But in the blog I do, there's also times where they mix. And so you could have an apple green with a blue. So you have your phosphite and it's entering that series with the turquoise, or you can have the chalcosiderite end member where it's mixing with the turquoise and you visually can see it. Those are cool pieces. There's some cool ones out there. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so just another question here. Actually, I'll just expand on this a little bit, which is how possible is it to do to try and identify the source of origin of turquoise if you have a piece which is unprovenanced?
It is difficult, and it depends on what somebody's source knowledge is. So if somebody was using one of my books and they looked at the picture of Bisbee, as long as it's the classic high grade to gem grade Bisbee, they can identify it from a picture, because the only mine in the world that looks like Bisbee is Bisbee. But there are other colors of Bisbee that you can't just put in a book. You know, people don't want to see all the colors of Bisbee, they want to see the better. And so then there's mines like Sleeping Beauty and Kingman, which look very similar. And generally you would have to cut a lot of it to be able to tell the nuanced differences in color or matrix, or in even when they do the clarity. And so to give you an idea is, as you build your knowledge, Kingman turquoise that is clear with clarity is much more dense than Sleeping Beauty. One of the reasons why everybody in the world says that turquoise has to be treated is because Sleeping Beauty was a massive turquoise mine that had low density, and they could cut it and it would look pretty, but within a month or two, it was not going to look like that as oils and things got attached to the surface of the stone as they wore it, because it is very porous. And so you would learn the difference in the porosity and the density of Sleeping Beauty and Kingman, and you could actually tell the difference. So a lot of it has to do with visual. It's kind of like if you do the opal and everything's done on a 10 scope, and that's how they decide on what the clarity rule is and all of that. In turquoise, a lot of it is going to be knowledge that people have to learn, hands-on learning. And books are great, but even in the calibrations, you can't get every color right in a book. So turquoise is complicated. But yeah, if it's one of the top mines and you have enough knowledge, you can say, this is Chinese turquoise from Yungay Sea, this is Chinese turquoise from Zhoushan, this is Lander Blue from Nevada, and somebody else had said that the Chinese was Lander, then you're going to go on who knows what they're talking about and who was the salesperson. And the reason why it has become such an issue is turquoise is generally not sold by the carat in the sense of one. It's sold by 10 carats. So if I charge you, I don't know, $1,000 a carat for Lander Blue, and it's a, I don't know, 10 carat stone, you got $10,000. If that's Chinese turquoise, it's worth no more than $40 a carat. And so I would be a little upset. And so the Turquoise Conference, what we're going to be doing at Turquoise United and getting GIA to document categories and start updating information that is complete and visual, so that people can learn the colored gem turquoise if they want. And so that's part of what we're trying to work on.
Okay, Jordan, just a couple of quickies here.
Yeah.
Is in the world of topaz, for example, if you have a blue topaz before the time of irradiation, then you can trust that it's natural. And I'm wondering if there is a date or in terms of dating of a turquoise. you know, if it's from that, found before that time, it's not been treated?
First off, how would you know the date?
Well,
So I
sometimes, you
can
know, when
date the
things are,
science,
when
but
things are
dating a
collected.
stone, you might have to date the use, or the jewelry it's set in, or the art that it's used in. So you'll hear a lot of people say that, well, natural turquoise changes color. Sure, natural turquoise can change color, but I can show you thousands of pieces of turquoise that have been mined hundreds of years ago, 10 years ago, 1,000 years ago. They haven't changed color. Color change has to do with density. And if you're dealing with a dense stone, it's not going to have any space to absorb any body oils or things like that. So there is turquoise that will change color depending on its porosity. There's turquoise that won't, depending on its density. And so, but dating the impact of imitations. So as soon as plastic was available, they were, in the late 1940s, they were figuring out how to, quote, stabilize turquoise. And it's a fun story. If you guys are scientists out there, you ought to listen to some of these guys that have created the imitations. It is cool. These guys are artists. And if we can appreciate education, we become more informed. And but late 1940s is how I would categorize it for you. The problem is I can date the science, but I can't date the stone.
Yeah, I have nuggets, and I'm just wondering if they were collected in the 30s and the 40s. And I'm just wondering if they were pre-treatment and are they natural in terms of their color and
So to
density.
give you an idea, I could tell you, but it wouldn't have anything to do with pre or post.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to ask you was, is there a way to protect your turquoise from absorbing oils and perfumes and things like that that will change its color? Because not all turquoise that's out there is dense enough or treated enough that it's not porous anymore.
So there's several categories to deal with that story-wise. One is the story I tell is the turquoise becomes a part of you as it absorbs your oils, your skin oils, or you wear hairspray or things like that. That's one. Another category, as far as the taking care of it, it's the polish. So if we have a high grit polish on that stone, as long as you are not, if you take it off when you take a shower, if it's a ring, take it off while you're doing a shower or the dishes, things like that, then that'll preserve the polish. And so that polish, as you take a rag, whatever, and wipe it off once in a while, is protecting the polish, because your grit, your oils and things like that eventually can wear down that stone. And then those emollients are going to attach in the structure of that porosity of the stone. That's what changes the color.
Yeah.
But a lot of turquoise, there's not much you can do. It's just going to have that color change. And in some markets, because that is a less valuable turquoise, it doesn't harm the value. So you could actually look at a piece of Zuni jewelry in New Mexico. I don't know if anybody knows the Zuni style of jewelry. And a lot of the stones have changed color. It does not harm the value because it just means that it's an older piece. But the value was not really the turquoise. The value in that is all the small stones and the inset and the design. So there's lots of different generalizations that answer specific questions to turquoise. And you can't just give it a single answer. One of my fun ones I want to give everybody is hardness. The diamond industry has gotten away with this for years, claiming, you know, diamonds are a 10, diamonds are a 10. I was at a lecture one time and I asked in case anybody doesn't know, I have bad humor. So don't get offended at my humor. I asked the question, I said, did you guys all hear about that fist fight at the British Museum in one of their fine art galleries? And the guy was like, no. I'm like, yeah, it was between two women and they were in a fist fight. One of the women collected Michelangelo and one of the women collected Monet, and they were arguing over which painter produced a painting that was harder on the Mohs scale so that they knew how to care for it. Hardness has nothing to do with rarity, nothing. And so I've always been fascinated by that. So if you're going to buy a rare piece of turquoise, learn how to care for it. Don't do the dishes and whatever, but enjoy why you bought it. But don't compare it to a diamond.
No.
So a related,
So,
obviously a related question to that that's been in the chat is how do you safely clean turquoise jewelry, and can anything that's been stained be brought back to normal or at least improved?
Well, generally, so the care is just going to be the awareness, like I said. But in cleaning the jewelry that the turquoise is set in, that is important. Do not use liquid cleaner for your silver. That will attach to the surface of the stone, or it will soak into the stone and change the color. If you're doing silver or you're doing gold and you're going to clean it, you could have somebody buff it. The buffing compound is not going to harm the turquoise. If you're worried about the gold and you don't want it to, or the silver and you don't want it to look dirty or older, you want to get the patina off a little, that would be my suggestion. Take it to somebody who knows what they're doing and they can buff the silver. Just never use silver cleaner. Any rouge cloth, which is a polishing cloth that has a rouge on it, dry, then you can rub it like your mom would clean her old silver in that sense, depending on how old you are. Maybe my grandma. And you just rub it with your fingers and your hands, and that will give a polish to the metal and clean it up. If it's older than that, you're just going to have to either enjoy it looking old or have somebody professionally clean it with buffing.
any other questions?
Yeah, the last question here, there's two people basically with the same question, which is how can you identify if something's been stabilized or treated?
Same thing, you're going to have to learn. What we hope is that if we can get the salespeople to, if we can get the buyers to be aware that the salespeople have to certify what they're saying, and then that ties the salesperson to the law that they've misrepresented. Too many people think that somebody's reputation is worthy of them ignoring the value of getting something certified. The salesperson should always be willing to tell and write everything that they're telling you on that a piece of paper with their name on it, because they appreciate your business or they appreciate you giving them time. If we're unwilling to certify things in writing of what we're saying, generally something is wrong. And at the prices that turquoise is starting to sell for, more and more people are becoming aware that they need to get things in writing. So one of the stories I use is that if you were going to drive from Albuquerque to Santa Fe, New Mexico, it's a 50-minute drive. Regardless of the direction you go, there are billboards, advertisements on billboards for a lot of different jewelry stores. In all of my years, I'm 54, I have never seen a billboard or an advertisement in a magazine by a world famous designer or anybody else. I have never seen one that says, "Hi, we rip everybody off and we're waiting for you." Everybody markets themselves as reputable. Everybody. My gift shop at the Turquoise Museum carries stabilized, enhanced, cultured, plastic, and natural. And we certify in writing whichever one it is that you find that you like, and the price point and the reason for your purchase. So if you're buying for your granddaughter and you know she's going to lose the ring in 3 weeks, but you want to show her you love her and that you spent some time in New Mexico, my suggestion, don't buy natural. And so it just depends on where somebody's at in the participation. But everybody should be willing to certify what they say in writing. And then you don't come back. It's like if I tell you that it's real turquoise, everything is real. If you touch it, it's real. So even pure plastic is real turquoise color. And so that's what you're looking for, is that awareness when you go shopping, and that the store that you consider is reputable is not just famous, but they're reputable. And their sales staff should know exactly what they're selling you and be glad to tell you.
Actually, Joanne, I think the sub rosa on that was like, it was really a gemological question. If a gemologist gets a supposed turquoise in their hands to be evaluated, how would they, what instrumentation could they use, or what means could they use to determine
So
whether it's treated or
the studies
stabilized?
that we have done, the studies that I've done on with my guys and the scientists I use, you could go after carbon. So carbon does not exist in turquoise. So other than the blank of the test, which is going to have a carbon reading, you could read the carbon in it and know that it is not natural. It is plastic, oil, or wax, because carbon exists in all of those, but carbon does not exist in turquoise naturally. The other way that you can do it is anytime you're going to break the index, the heat index that something was created. So there's different grades of plastic. So you'll hear a lot of people say, oh yeah, I just take a hot pin and I know whether it's plastic or not. No, you don't. Cheap plastic you do, but the rest doesn't work for anything else because your heat is not high enough. You'd need a settling torch to break that bond within. And so there's different ways that scientifically you could prove whether turquoise is natural or not. A lot of it you can just do visual because it is not a natural color. So if you know that it's Kingman turquoise and it doesn't look like this, then you know it's natural, it's stabilized, or it's enhanced, because those colors are not natural. So if you know your turquoise, then and you know the source, then you could actually tell. So there's different ways, but it involves a lot of very, very specific hands-on knowledge. Because when somebody brings you or sends to GIA or anywhere else in the world and they send a piece, there is no reference for that piece. And so if you don't have the knowledge of that piece, you have to totally learn. And so if you know the knowledge of, and you know the past of the piece, it's like if I found I'm not a car guy, so forgive this, but if I found a 1967 Mustang in the jungles in a cave in the middle of nowhere, Vietnam, I know it's a 1967 Mustang, but I can't explain why and how it got there. That is specific knowledge. But if I don't have the knowledge of a 67 Mustang, I would just say, hey, that's a car. And so it depends on how much knowledge we have to the specific item that is outside of our purview to identify, natural or mind source.
Well, I think the sign of an intelligent person is their ability to admit that they've only just begun to learn. They don't know everything. And I think you've teased us enough with this, Joe Dan, to help us realize how little we really know about turquoise. And I'm personally going to try and read up a lot more. I'd like you to leave us with the titles of your books so that if people want to get them in their reference library on turquoise, I think that would be very helpful to them if you want to put that in chat.
Okay, I'll have my son put that in chat.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for giving us your time, sharing your knowledge and your passion with us. You're a product of many generations of people who have worked with turquoise. And your knowledge comes not just from books, but it comes from digging, mining, cutting, and researching. So God bless you.
Lots of people.
Well, you know what? That is the basic building block for everything I know is through people. So thank you for reemphasizing the value of people in this whole equation. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone for listening and being such a good audience. And I'd like to also let you know that we're breaking with tradition. In July, we're going to do our best to get some experts on pearls, the first organic non-mineral gem that we'll be looking at. And pearls are really important in the jewelry trade. We don't know enough about them, generally speaking. And I think this could be a very interesting topic if I manage to get the right people. So I throw it out there. I throw the gauntlet out. If anybody here amongst us all can give me some good leads for experts on pearls, I will gladly receive them and make best use of them that I can. So that's what we're looking forward to at the end of July. And thank you very much, Joe Dan, for sharing your time. I found it very interesting and very educating. And thank you all for coming. Hope you have a good remainder of the weekend. You too also, Joe Dan. And thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And thank your son for helping us out.
Oh yeah, believe me, I do.
All right. Well, have a great day, Joe Dan. Thank you for helping us today.
You're welcome.
And I thank you all for giving us your time and joining us once again.
Just a short announcement. I've just put into the chat the YouTube URL for April's presentation on zircon. I hope to have this one up on YouTube sometime this week. So I'll send the link out to Ray, and he can forward that on to everybody.
Yep. So yeah, if you want to learn, and this is the beauty of GemQuest so far, is that we're helping people see and learn more about each individual gem than you'll ever get in your gemological training, because we've employed people who have specialized in these things. So I'm very grateful for those who have up to this point donated their time and helped us learn. And thank you, Jolian, for being our host and helping us with the archiving of these programs.
You're welcome.
So ta-ta for now.